Hello class and welcome to Pharmacology 1. It's PHA 136 in case you don't belong in this class. My name is Catherine Sams and I'm going to be your instructor for this semester. We have a lot of information to cover. If you need any help at any time, please feel free to pause this lecture. You can backtrack. I'm also going to include just the PowerPoint slides in the Blackboard for your information so you can print them off if you'd like to. Okay, so let's get started. This first week we're going to talk about the evolution of medicinal drugs. We're going to cover the history of medicinal drugs, contemporary pharmacy practices, complementary and alternative medicine, drug regulation, and FDA food health claims. So we're not going to go over every slide in a lot of detail. This PowerPoint was actually made previously before I started this class, so we might skim through parts of it and spend a little more time on more pertinent parts. All right, so this is the history of medicinal drugs. It's not really that important in the scheme of this class, so we'll just skip over this part. It is interesting. There's some names on there if you wanted to go back and look those people up. They have contributed a lot to the history of pharmacology. But we're going to start with Claude Bernard. This is the beginning of the modern age of medicinal drugs. It's more pertinent to this class. So Claude Bernard was an interesting guy. He demonstrated that drugs have certain specific actions within the body, and the way he found this out was through vivisection. And if you're not familiar with vivisection, it is an exploratory surgery done on a living animal for the purposes of determining, effects of different medications and stuff like that. And apparently he had no qualms about performing vivisection on family pets and things. He is one of the founders of experimental pharmacology and the science of drugs and their interactions with systems of living animals. So, American pharmacology began with colonial physicians, most owned a dispensary or a pharmacy. They were also called apothecaries. They prescribed, prepared, and dispensed drugs imported from Britain. Then the U.S. Pharmacopoeia was developed in 1820, and it was the first official listing of drugs in the United States. We actually still use the U.S. Pharmacopoeia today. It regulates standards and quality of medicine and preparation of those medications. Things that are going to be pertinent to you in later classes will be USP 797, 795, and 7800, which regulate non-sterile compounding, sterile compounding, and hazardous sterile compounding. But you'll get more into those when you get into Pharmacy 200. Let's see, the first Pharmacist Association was formed in 1852. It was formed to create a boundary between pharmacy and medicine and allowed pharmacists to grow and increase in professional stature. The American Pharmacists Association is also still active today. They intend to help pharmacists grow and increase their professional stature. And if you actually went to their website right now, they have a guide for pharmacists to tackle the coronavirus and how it's pertinent, where they can help with the coronavirus and how to set up drug screenings in pharmacies and all that. It's really interesting if you'd like to take a look at that website. All right, we have a lot of different pharmacologists here from the 20th century. Again, you can take a look at these different ones through here. The most important part as far as this class is concerned, we're going to begin with Alexander Fleming. He discovered penicillin. He's probably the one you'll hear the most about, at least in modern pharmacy. He was a Scottish physician and microbiologist, and in 1928 he discovered penicillin, which was the world's first broadly effective antibiotic. We still use that largely today in modern medicine, and it's also and a lot of other combination drugs as well. In fact, in 1945, Alexander Fleming won a Nobel Prize in physiology for his part in discovering penicillin. So what does the term pharmacology mean? It is the science of drugs and their actions in the body. So it's important to know not only the drugs, their brand names, what they're indicated for, but also how they work in your body, and what other drugs they might interact with, or what other health conditions you might not be able to tolerate them with, such as like pregnancy, for example. Okay, the pharmacist and the pharmacy technician role. The roles of the pharmacist and the pharmacy technicians are similar in a lot of ways. The pharmacy technician is there to assist the pharmacist. It's very similar to a doctor-nurse relationship. The pharmacist is responsible for preparation, selling, and dispensing of drugs and compounds. They fill the prescriptions, they check the prescriptions. They are the ones who are going to advise patients on proper use of drugs and any side effects they might encounter with specific medications. And in fact, over the last 20 years since I've been in pharmacy, the role of the retail pharmacist, at least, has changed a lot. They're gearing them more towards patient counseling and direct patient care. And the pharmacy technician is taking on more specific roles within the pharmacy as far as taking prescriptions over the phone, entering medications, and as listed here. The role of the pharmacy technician, again, like I said, has changed a lot just since I've been in pharmacy when I started 20 years ago. So according to this, the pharmacy technician will receive the prescriptions and fill requests. They verify information on the prescriptions, such as birthdays, drug allergies, things like that. They count, weigh, measure, and mix medications, prepare sterile IVs, prepare prescription labels and select containers, order medications, transfer prescriptions, help patients with over-the-counter drugs. Now, ultimately, that is still the pharmacist's discretion whether they want their technician to be able to help a patient with the over-the-counter medications. Most of the time, they'll just recommend something, and the pharmacy technician can either show them where the medication is over the counter. If it's something that's regulated, such as the sale of pseudoephedrine, they can also write those things down in logs and stuff like that. Let's see, they also encourage the patients to be counseled by the pharmacist, especially when they have a new medication. And they oversee and maintain automated dispensing systems. Let's see. So pharmacy technicians are now required to be certified in the state of Kentucky. Like I said, when I first started pharmacy, I started working in a retail pharmacy in Tennessee, and at the time you were not required to be certified or registered. But the laws have changed, I think just within the last 10 years, that they now require pharmacy technicians to be certified and registered within their state of practice. So this class will hopefully prepare you to take your National Technician Certification exam. So there's different organizations for the pharmacy technician once you become certified. A lot of these are encouraged for you to continue developing in your career. There's the American Association of Pharmacy Technicians. What they do is they provide leadership, networking, and continuing education opportunities for pharmacy technicians. The continuing education is a pretty significant part of becoming a certified technician, because you are required to have 20 hours of continuing education hours every 2 years. And what that means is you'll take different articles, different classes, things like that. You'll have exams, competency exams basically, just to show that you're, just to show that you're actively continuing your education and maintaining your credentials to be certified. Let's see, the next one is the Pharmacy Technician Educators Council, which I am actually going to be a part of. They unite, support, and empower educators in technician for technicians and education and training of pharmacy technicians. Let's see, we also have the National Pharmacy Technician Association. They are committed to serving pharmacy technicians through education, advocacy, and support. So some of them overlap a little bit in what they do, but they are all very effective bodies to help the pharmacy technician in your career development and advancement. All right, medicinal drugs. So we have the different definitions here. A drug is a medicinal substance used to change the way a living organism functions. The pharmacologic effect is a drug action on a living system. Therapeutic agent relieves the symptoms of the disease, and a prophylactic drug prevents or decreases the severity of the disease. So a drug, for example, might be something along the lines of a prescription for high blood pressure or atrial fibrillation or something like that. It's going to change the way your heart is functioning. The pharmacologic effect is the way that those drugs actually work in your body. The therapeutic agent relieves the symptoms of the disease. For example, you could consider Tylenol a therapeutic agent because it's going to relieve the symptom of a headache or any kind of pain that you're experiencing in your body. The prophylactic drug, for example, I get migraines, so I take medication as prophylaxis to prevent the migraines. Okay, so this is pretty interesting here. The drug origins and sources. So some drugs are derived from plants. For example, the digoxin is from a foxglove. A foxglove is named digitalis, which is where the name digoxin actually comes from. So we all know that morphine is derived from opium and poppy seeds. Let's see. Oops. Go back one there. Oh well, I guess it won't let me go back. So one thing I did want to mention was the thyroid medication. A lot of thyroid medications today are derived from animal thyroid glands, largely the pig. I'm not really sure why the pigs are similar to us, but that's what their Armour thyroid, for example, uses thyroid from a pig. So let's see, complementary and alternative medicine. So alternative medicine is medical products and practices that are not part of standard care and are used in the place of standard practice. For example, my mom is not a fan of Western medicine, so she uses herbs and supplements to control her blood pressure. It's not necessarily recommended. Complementary medication would be similar or alternative medicine, but it's also used together with standard practice. And there's concerns about complementary and alternative medication because, one, there's not a whole lot of evidence regarding safety and efficacy of taking those in lieu of prescription medication from a physician. There's lack of training, knowledge, and confidence of healthcare providers in this area. Frequent lack of disclosure. A lot of times if you're taking dietary supplements, you're not going to think to mention those to your physician, and sometimes those will interact with prescription medications that you're taking. And they're also not really regulated by government regulatory bodies such as the FDA. And here we go. It says here the alternative medicine, the dietary supplements, are not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration unless there's a safety concern. I'm not really going to discuss homeopathy. There's not a whole lot. I mean, you can look over that slide, excuse me, but that really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the modern pharmacy practice. So there's different drug regulatory bodies. The Food and Drug Administration is one that you're probably going to hear about the most, working in pharmaceutical sales. So the FDA is responsible for ensuring that any drug or food product approved for marketing is safe when used as directed on the label. The new drug application is the vehicle through which a drug sponsor proposes that the FDA approve a new drug, proposed new pharmaceuticals. The drug sponsor is a pharmaceutical company that tests and submits evidence to the FDA about the drug's safety and effectiveness. Now, the drug sponsor or pharmaceutical companies are things like companies like Pfizer and things like that. When you see drug commercials on TV, they'll usually mention the pharmaceutical company that are associated with those. Legend drugs are sold by prescription and labeled RX only, and then over-the-counter items may be sold without a prescription. So there's different medication guides. The FDA requires that medication guides with certain drugs are dispensed with them. I'm sure you've seen there's medication guides that are sold inside prescription bottles. That's the package insert information that tells you anything from the chemical makeup to the indications to different side effects. What is the role of the Food and Drug Administration? As we discussed a moment ago, the FDA is responsible for ensuring that any drug or food product approved for marketing is safe when used as directed on the label. It controls purity, labeling accuracy, and product safety. I am going to include a small YouTube video in this module. It's not mandatory that you watch it. It's not going to be graded or anything, but it does just include the steps of drug approval processes. It's interesting, like I think it's 3 or 4 minutes. If you'd like to watch it, it is interesting. Okay, the drug approval process. When the FDA requires evidence of safety and effectiveness of a new drug, they grant permission for testing of any new drugs. Drugs are tested on animals and then humans. The NDA includes a proposed drug's history of development and testing, proposed labeling, and samples. The FDA approval granted if review boards deems drugs to be safe and effective. When drugs are used for purposes other than those approved by the FDA, the term is called off-label use. So there's another different process is the clinical trials for the drug approval. We actually at the University of Kentucky Hospital, they have a department called investigational drugs, and that's just a step in the FDA approval. Again, there's the different phases of the drug approval process. That will be covered more extensively in that video I mentioned before. The normal time it takes from a drug development to testing and implementation is it used to be 7 to 10 years. The review process has been expedited a little, and normally they don't take that long anymore. The Prescription Drug User Fee Act of 1992, it shortened that process, and fees paid by drug companies upon the NDA submission, funds used to hire reviewers, and standard time frame now reduced to 10 months. All right, there's different safety alerts that you might see on different medications. For example, as I mentioned before, if you're pregnant, that comes with a lot of risk for taking different over-the-counter and prescription medications. There's different labels. There's Category A, which is no risk. That means it's safe for everyone. Category B is the risk can't be ruled out. Category C is caution advised. D is a definite risk, and X is do not use. So the drug approval process, post-marketing surveillance, the good manufacturing processes are to be followed by manufacturers as spelled out in the FDA regulations. We actually use those at the University of Kentucky Inpatient Hospital Pharmacy. In the clean room there's different standards, there's different levels of standards, I guess, for sterile compounding and procedures. Good manufacturing practices are at the top of that list, and that's what they implement there in the sterile compounding room. The U.S. Pharmacopoeia National Formulary, the standards regarding the strength, quality, effectiveness, and purity of drugs that must be followed by manufacturers. Let's see, post-marketing surveillance trials helps identify drugs that pose serious safety threats, and MedWatch is a program through which professionals and consumers can report serious adverse reactions. Removing drugs from the market. This occurs occasionally when the FDA believes that a drug no longer has a place in therapy, or if there's rare, unpredicted adverse events. When I first started in pharmacy, there was a group of medications called COX-2 inhibitors, and they were used largely to, they were a group of anti-inflammatories that were used for rheumatoid arthritis, and one of them was called Vioxx, and that drug was all the rage when I first started in pharmacy. Everyone was prescribing that, and it was later recalled because it had an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes. And in 2004, the FDA actually removed that drug from the market. I think I skipped over the black box warning, but I will mention that quickly here because I'm not, I think you'll need to know that as well for the exam. The black box warnings are just a step below recall. So there's serious adverse reactions that can still occur within a black box warning, but the FDA hasn't withdrawn that drug from the market. So an example of that one is another COX-2 inhibitor called Celebrex. It has the same risk of heart attack and stroke, but it's not quite as severe as it was with Vioxx. Okay, now we're going to talk about controlled substances. A controlled substance is defined as a drug with high potential for abuse that is categorized in a designated schedule according to probability of abuse. The Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, is probably the second other regulatory body that you're going to hear about a lot in pharmacy. So you're going to have the FDA and the DEA. The DEA is responsible for regulating the sale and use of controlled substances. Registration is required for all individuals and institutions that handle or prescribe controlled substances. So there's different schedules. A Schedule 1 is not legal here in the United States. For the most part, marijuana is actually considered a Schedule 1, and I'm sure, as you know, different states in the United States have legalized the use of recreational marijuana. But things like heroin and stuff like that are also considered a Schedule 1, and they have no legal use here. A Schedule 2 is things like morphine and oxycodone, and I just totally skipped over that. My apologies. We can go ahead and continue through that one though. A Schedule 3 is things like hydrocodone. Schedule 4 are benzodiazepines like Xanax and lorazepam. And then a Schedule 5 are things like codeine that don't necessarily have to be used with a prescription, but you do have to keep a track of it. And I think that law differs from state to state as well. So controlled substances, the Schedule 3, 4, and 5 may be refilled 5 times within 6 months. And that prescription, once the physician writes it and dates it, is only good for 6 months. So if you had a prescription that was dated February 28th, it would only be good until August 28th of that same year. Schedule 2, no refills are allowed. You need a new prescription each time you receive a Schedule 2 narcotic drug. So there's DEA Form 222. That is how we order Schedule 2 medications in hospitals and retail settings. I believe in your lab you will see a mock form, a mock 222 form. You'll see all the different components that are on that form and everything that has to be included. So the DEA Form 106 is just to document the destruction of those Schedule 2 narcotics. So say if you had some that were expired or damaged and you couldn't dispense them. Which agency of the federal government is responsible for regulating the sale and use of controlled substances? The Drug Enforcement Administration. So there's generic drugs. Let's see, the patent is a drug sponsor has a sole right to manufacture the drug. For example, Prilosec is the brand name for omeprazole. So when the patent ran out for Prilosec, the generic was then available. So the generic of omeprazole was still available even with a prescription. Several years later, once the patent expiration had passed, that's when it actually went over the counter. So the patent protection is generic and brand names belong to that drug sponsor. The patent expiration is other companies can produce the drug as a generic product, substantial price difference between brand name and generic, and then the generic substitution, an important means of reducing healthcare costs. Abbreviated New Drug Application, or ANDA, is submitted to the FDA for approval to market a generic product. They must demonstrate that the generic product is interchangeable with the brand name drug. You're going to hear some patients say that only the brand name drug is the only one they can take. So they should be the same, but the generics are allowed different fillers in their medications. They're not potent fillers or anything. They don't change the integrity of the drug, but again, the FDA regulates that. Generic drugs must meet the following requirements. They contain the same active ingredient. They have to be identical in strength, dosage form, route of administration, have the same indications, meet the same batch requirements for identity, strength, purity, and quality, and yield similar blood absorption and urinary excretion curves for the active ingredient. Over-the-counter drugs can be purchased without a prescription. Over-the-counter brand names, for example, instantly recognized by consumers like Tums, Tylenol, Advil. The brand name may not change when ingredients do. Potential for danger if patients are unaware of current ingredients. The role of the pharmacy technician is to provide guidance and location of over-the-counter products, inform patients about what conditions these products treat, and read ingredients to patients when helping select products. Again, I would just consult whatever pharmacist you are working with. When you do your rotations, for example, the pharmacist that you're working under his license, his or her license. So that would be at their discretion whether they would want you to actually recommend or help a patient with an over-the-counter drug. So there's different claims that the FDA has to deal with. For example, whole grains reduce the risk of heart disease and certain cancers, which is true. But on the consumer education side, you have to know that food products are not substitutes for prescribed medications. Same with soy protein reducing the risk of heart disease. It should be used together with drug therapy. All right, that's the end of chapter 1.